Hi, welcome to the Schenectady Today Show. I'm your host for this edition, John Cancio. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Good show today. I'm very excited. Before we start, I want to thank our technicians who have been working very hard, show after show every day, Todd Wilson and Tim Voss. Thank you very much for all your work. Next on the show, we have Bill Lithgow. He is a councilman for Rensselaer. Welcome to the show, Bill. Thank you very much for being here today. Now, what position do you play on the City Council for Rensselaer?
Well, I'm an alderman representing the 3rd Ward, which is the neighborhood right around the train station over there. And I'm also the chairman of the Audit Committee, which means that I review the bills before the treasurer pays them. And I assist with the, as we all do, with the making of the budget in the city.
So how did you get involved in politics?
Well, I got involved a long time ago, back when I left college. I'm a Siena College graduate from the class of 1963, and I received I was the first upstate youth to win a Ford Foundation fellowship to study the state legislature, and it was on the staff of then Senate Majority Leader Walter Mahoney. And every year in that internship, there were 5 students from mostly downstate, and I was the first upstater, and others followed me from upstate. But we studied the legislative process. I went on from there to graduate school at the Wharton School in the University of Pennsylvania, and I studied public administration. And then after the Army was over, 2 years later, and I had spent a tour in Vietnam, I came home to Albany, and I began a career in public service with the New York State Assembly as a staff person. And I went on to other jobs in 2 state agencies, and then 20 years with the federal government.
Well, we are in Schenectady, but what made you want to be on the council in Rensselaer?
Well, my father was a councilman right in the 3rd Ward. I'm filling the job that he had 40 years ago, believe it or not. And when I came home to, my mother was aging, and I came home to work with her. And I retired from my job in the federal civil service. And I came into Rensselaer, and I found out that there was an opening, and I got interested. Now, I have been active in politics as a moderate Republican in New York City for 20-some years, maybe 30 years. After I left Albany, I got active with State Senator Roy Goodman and his people in Manhattan, and I stayed active throughout all those years. And in 1983, I became president of a group called the Ripon Society of New York, which was an offshoot of the moderate Republican research and policy organization that was founded in Boston at Harvard University in 1962. And I stayed in that position right through the year 2001 when the chapter was abolished.
Okay, and you also, as a councilman, you run an ad each month in the Informed Constituent on in the back of the paper every single month.
Yes.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, I started out, when I returned to Rensselaer, I've always been interested in journalism as an amateur and in writing, and I took several writing courses at various schools in New York over the years. And when I came home, a friend of mine pointed out that this newspaper, and I instantly liked it as an alternative newspaper. And I have a moderate Republican philosophy, and I wanted to be with them, and I wanted to write about international affairs and something I call the Freedom Republicans, which was an offshoot of my Ripon Society duties. So I started out taking an ad about that and writing about that. The reason I take an ad in the paper is that I contribute to it, but some of to make sure that I can write subjects I want to write about, I decided to take an ad, and rather than just contribute to the newspaper and then take assignments, I decided that by taking the ad, I can actually write about the subjects I want to write about.
And you write a lot about the city of Rensselaer.
Well, that evolved. I started out writing about the Ripon Society, the Freedom Republicans, and the Underground Railroad. But when I became elected, I realized there were many, many things happening in Rensselaer that did not attract the attention of the more general mass media. So I decided to focus my monthly column on the city of Rensselaer.
And you honor people in these columns as well, don't you?
Yes, this particular is about the story of Edmonia Lewis, who it turns out was from Rensselaer, and her name is on this honor roll, which is called the Honor Roll of the Abolitionists, which we awarded to the city of Rensselaer back at Memorial Day, because her name is on it. And Edmonia Lewis was a was born in Rensselaer in the 1840s, and she went on to study at the place called the New York Central College, founded by the abolitionists Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. Then she went on to Oberlin College, which even at that point in time, around the 1860s, was admitting women. And then she went to Boston and went from there to Rome, Italy, where she became the first African-American sculptor of international renown. And during the 1870s, her fame soared in Rome. And her paintings, which were, some of them are shown down here.
Some different sculptures.
The sculptures, rather, were, they pulled in something like $50,000 in 1870 currency, which was quite good. And she then went on from Rome to the San Francisco and San Diego area where she settled and I guess where she died. But her name was on this honor roll, which I have been promoting for about 20-some years, more than that even, because this scroll...
And this is something you presented to the city of Rensselaer.
Yes, on Memorial Day weekend. And we did it because Edmonia Lewis's name turned out to be on this scroll. Now, I never knew that when I came back to Rensselaer. When I came back, I had been promoting this scroll done by a friend of mine who is now 88 years old, who created this scroll, and it contains the names of 700 of the more famous abolitionists, both white and black, and from America, England, Ireland, and France. And never did I know that at that point in time that there was going to be a connection between this honor roll and Rensselaer, but it turns out there was, because Edmonia Lewis's name is on the honor roll. So that's why we presented the honor roll to the city of Rensselaer on Memorial Day weekend.
And what are you trying to achieve by having these articles? Have gotten reaction from these?
Well, yes, I have. My most gratifying reaction was on St. Patrick's Day. I was taking the bus up Western Avenue the day after the blizzard, and it was full of young students from SUNY who were revelers for the holiday, St. Patrick's Day. And one of them came up to me and said, do you write for the Informed Constituent newspaper? And I said, well, yes, I do. And I don't usually have my picture in the paper, but apparently once in a while it does get in there. But apparently she recognized me, and she said, do you write the column on the back page? And I said, yes, I do. And she said to me, you're awesome. Your column is awesome. And I was very flattered by that, so I remember that particular. But it is catching on in Rensselaer, and in the paper goes out to 5 counties. We have 10,000 issues per month over 5 counties, and it goes to the universities and restaurants, laundromats.
And it's
churches,
available here in Schenectady as well.
Oh yes, yes.
Important to point out. Okay, you
also Union College for sure, and
Union College gets it. And you were mentioning the Underground Railroad and its connection to Schenectady.
Well, yes. While I was home, I noticed this book.
You did your research, right?
Yes, I noticed this book called The Underground Railroad Conductor, and it's by a fellow named Tom Calarco, who lives here in Schenectady. But this reminded me, in reading about it, it talked all about various houses that were stops on the Underground Railroad here in the Capital District. And I've got interested in that because for about 20-some years in New York City, through my friends in this group called the Freedom Republicans, we were involved in civil rights and in the Underground Railroad history movement. I did not, at that point in time, this would be 2001, realize that it was such a big idea here in the Albany area, and it really is. Tom Calarco from Schenectady has written another book. It's really the Bible for the Underground Railroad history, as I understand it, in the Capital District. It's called The Underground Railroad in the Adirondack region. And mentioning Schenectady, 2 people that he mentions in the book were from Schenectady, or at least passed through Schenectady. They were fugitive slaves, called freedom seekers today. One was a Mr. Moses Viney, who came through Albany and spent time in Troy and finally settled in Schenectady, and he came to become the chauffeur for Mr. Eliphalet Knott, who was a longtime president of Union College. And another fellow that Mr. Calarco mentions was Charles Nelson, who was another runaway slave who was a personal slave to a couple who were vacationing, went on to a vacation in Niagara Falls, and they left him here in Schenectady where he escaped, and they became a free man through the Underground Railroad in this region.
So there is a lot of interesting history here in Schenectady as well.
Yes, and in
fact,
it
all kind of connects, doesn't it?
Oh yes.